Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of third person series. In previous episodes I created some functionalities that makes my character hold up to 200 weapons in 2 slots, and by picking up the third 200 weapon, if 2 slots are full it will drop the first holster's weapon. But some issues may happen sometimes for showing up the widget when weapon is dropped, so here I'm going to fix it. First I open my master weapon blueprint, and as you can see here I have this weapon widget that actually shows name of the weapon and also this interaction area, which is a sphere collision that is used for interaction functionalities, and finally I have this mesh. Alright, first I'm going to drag and drop this interaction area to my weapon mesh, so if it will be a child of my weapon mesh, and I'm also going to drag and drop my weapon widget on interaction area. So now this widget is child of interaction area and interaction area is child of weapon mesh. Okay, now I compile and close my master weapon, and now I open my weapon system component. Now I'm going to create a macro similar to this check rifle holster, but this time it is for my pistol holster. So I name it check pistol holster. Alright, now I'm going to add some inputs. First one in type of execution, and I name it in, and the second one I name it the weapon in type of master weapon object reference. Alright, and for outputs I need 3 outputs. First one I name it pistol holster empty, and second one full pistol holster, and finally this one I name it weapon. And first one and second one should be in type of execution. Alright, now I get my holster 3, which is actually my handgun or pistol holster, and now I drag a node and search for an is valid node. And I connect it here. Okay, and I also connect this D weapon to weapon output, and here I drag a node and add another is valid node, and I connect my in-hand weapon to this one. And here first I check my holster 3 is valid or it has a value or not. If it doesn't have any value, that means my pistol holster is empty, so I connect this is not valid execution to pistol holster empty. And now I should check that my holster 3 is equal to my in-hand weapon or not. So I get them both, and here I add a new equal node and connect them both together, and here I add a branch node and connect it to here, and finally I get my drop weapon function. I drag and drop it here, and I connect true part of this branch to here, and I also get also connect this is not valid here. Okay, and I also connect this drop weapon to full pistol holster, and I connect my holster 3 to this input of my drop weapon function. And okay, I think that's right. So I close my check pistol holster macro. Now I close my weapon system component, and now I open my weapon enumeration, and I add one more enumerator and I name it Mac10. Now I save and close this enumeration, and now I go back to my check pistol holster macro from my weapon system component, and here in this section I'm going to drag and drop my empty holster to here, and I name it slot 3, which is name of socket of my handgun, slot 3. Alright, now I compile, and here from weapon folder I open my pistol folder, and here I have master pistol class, which is actually derived from master weapon class, and I right click here and I click on create child blueprint class, and I name it Mac10. Alright, now here I select my weapon mesh component, and here I choose this one, SK-SMG11, which is this Mac10 model, and here from weapon extract section I set the name to Mac10, weapon enumeration to Mac10 again, and also weapon class to Mac10. And I'm not gonna touch mag size, current ammo or damage right now, so I compile and close this blueprint. Now I drag and place my Mac10 into the scene just like this. I place this here, and with Control and D I create some duplicates and place them in the scene. Alright, as you can see I have this Mac10 that has widget that shows the name of weapon, just like this AK gun. Okay, now I go back and open my weapon system component. Now I open my weapon pickup weapon function, and here in this enumeration select I have this Mac10 pin added, and now I drag and drop my check pistol holster here, and now I should connect every one-handed gun that I have in this enumeration to this macro. For example, I connect pistol 9mm, but I haven't created any weapon class for these two, but for Mac10 I just created a weapon class, so I connect it here. And for the weapon input I should connect my interacting weapon local variable, which I have promoted from this input of function in the episode 2. Okay, and now here I connect my holster 3 to here, and I connect it to pistol holster empty. Alright, and here I get my attached weapon to character, connect it to here, and I connect the weapon to here, and also I connect my empty holster to this holster input. Okay, and for full pistol holster this execution I drag and drop my pickup weapon, connect it here, and again I connect interacting weapon to the weapon, and now I compile and close it. Now I run the game. As you can see, if I overlap any of these Mac 10 guns just like AK and press E, it will be attached to my gun, my handgun holster, and if I do this again, it will drop previous weapon and replace it with new one, just like this one. Alright, now I'm going to create a socket for my character's hand, actually in hand socket. So I open my character mesh, which is in this case is SKM Queen. Here I click on this icon to open my bones tree, and in this section I search for hand R, which is this bone. Now I right click and click on add socket, and I name this socket in hand. Alright, now I right click and from add preview asset I select one of my weapon meshes. I search for example this AK, and I place it in the correct position just like this. Alright, now I save and close my mesh. Now I go back to my weapon system component, and here I'm going to create a new function and I name it has weapon equipped. Alright, first I drag my rifle equipped boolean here and also my handgun equipped boolean variable here. Now here I drag a node and search for an OR boolean node and connect them both together, and here I drag a node and I search for add return node. Sorry. Alright, and connect this one to here, and I name my return value, for example, is true. And I also select my input node and I check this pure, so my function will be a pure function, and pure functions don't have any execution pin and they just return some value. Alright, now I'm going to create another function and I name it equip dash unequip. Alright, and I add two inputs. First one is the weapon in type of master weapon object reference. Alright, and another one I name it one to equip in type of boolean. Alright, okay, now I get a slot based on weapon function and drag it here, connect the weapon to the weapon input, and I also promote weapon slot to a local variable, and I name it the weapon slot. Alright, now I drag a node from here and I search for attach actor to component. But before that I search for the weapon input, I get it here, and I search for attach actor to component. Alright, and connect it here. For parent I need my character mesh, so I drag my character reference variable, get it here. Here I search for get mesh and connect it to parent. And for my socket name, here I drag a node and search for select, and I connect my want to equip boolean input to index. For false, for true, I set my in hand socket name, which is my hand name of my hand socket. And for false, I drag a node and add another select node like this. And for index, I connect the weapon slot local variable that I promoted from here. I connect it here. For none, I don't touch it, I set it to none. And for primary weapon, I insert my slot 1 socket name. For secondary weapon, I insert my slot 2 socket name. And for my handgun, I set my slot 3 socket name, which is for my handgun actually. And for I keep location, rotation, and scale rule to snap to target. Okay. Here I get the weapon slot local variable, and here I drag and search for switch on weapon input enumeration. I connect this to here. And for primary weapon and secondary weapon, I set rifle equipped boolean to true, this one to true, and also set it to true. And also for my handgun, I set my handgun equipped boolean to true. Okay, now I add a branch node here, connect all of them to this branch node. And for condition, I search for want to equip boolean input. From here I right click and search for that, and I can access to this input just like that. And for true part, I grab my in-hand weapon variable and set it, and also I right click and search for the weapon input, connect it to here and connect it to true. And finally I drag a node from here and search for set weapon state. Alright, and I set it to in hand. And finally I add a return node. Okay, and for false, again I right click and get my the weapon input, and I drag a node and get my set weapon state function, connect it to here. I set it to equipped, and I also set my rifle equipped and handgun equipped booleans to false, and finally I add a return node. Okay, now I compile and go back to event graph. Inside event graph, I create a new custom event. I right click here and I search for custom event and I name it equip event. And I also create a new variable and I name it weapon input. And variable type should be my weapon input enumeration that I created in previous episodes. Alright, now I grab and get my weapon input variable and I check that it is not equal to none, and here I add a branch node and connect it here, and I also from true part I add another branch node and I open attach weapon to character function. As you can see, I have created these comments with a specific episode number and also color that shows these functions have been made in episode 3. These codes that are covered by this comment are from episode 2. Sorry, not 3, episode 2. And here I drag a node and I get a slot based on weapon function, and also I right click and I get my the weapon input, which comes from here, this input, and I connect it to the weapon. Alright, and I also get my weapon input here and click on set weapon input and I connect it to weapon slot output, and finally I call my equip event. Okay, now I compile and I go back to event graph, and now I create a new function and I name it input based on weapon. Alright, and for input I first create a new input and I name it weapon input, and weapon variable type should be weapon input enumeration, weapon input enum. Alright, now I drag a node from this input and I search for switch on weapon input enum. And for my primary weapon, I get my holster 1, get it here and add an isValid node and connect it to primary weapon. Now for isValid output, I add a new return node and I connect this one to this return node as the output, and I name this output weapon. Alright, Now I do same process for secondary weapon and also handgun. I get my holster 2, again is valid node, and holster 3 for my handgun. Okay, now I compile. Sorry, this should be my holster 1 connected here and here. Okay, now I compile and go back to event graph. Now I create a new function and I name it weapon type anim. And as input I add a new input and I name it e_weapon in type of weapon input enumeration. Weapon input and alright. Now I drag a node from here and I search for switch on weapon input enum, and here for primary weapon I get my holster 1 and get an is valid node and connect it here, and I connect is valid node to another is valid macro, and here I connect my in-hand weapon to this is valid node. I'm sorry. Okay, now I do the same for my holster 2 and 3. I connect all of is valid executions to this is valid node, and here I get my get a slot based on weapon function, and I connect it to here, and I connect my in-hand weapon to this input, and here I check that this weapon slot is equal to this weapon input enumeration. And now I add a branch node connected to here, and for true part I set my weapon input to none, and I add a return node here, and I add a new output in type of boolean and I name it can animate. Can animate. Alright, and for this true part it should be false, but here for false part I get my weapon input, I set it here and connect it to my weapon input, and also I add a return node and set it to true. Alright, and I also connect this one, this node to this not valid output. Okay, now I get a copy of these two nodes with Ctrl C and I paste them here, and I also connect all of these is not valid executions to here. Alright, now I compile and go back to event graph, and I also now open my input based on weapon function, and I make sure that it is a pure function, just like equip, just like that other pure function that I created. I don't know which was that. Alright, just like has weapon equipped, which is a pure function, input based on weapon also should be a pure function. Okay, now I close all of these functions and I go back to event graph. Alright, inside event graph I have this equip event. First I check that my weapon input is not equal to none. Then I added a new branch and I connect has weapon equipped pure function to the condition of this branch, and after that from false part I call my equip unequip function, and I get my weapon input here, which is actually my weapon input enumeration, and I also get my input based on weapon pure function. If you tick this option on any function, pure makes your function a pure function, and if I untick this you can see it will be a normal function. Pure functions don't have these execution pins, they only have one input and output, and I'm going to connect this weapon output to input of this equip unequip function, and I also set one to equip input to true. Okay, now I compile and run the game. As you can see, my character now doesn't have any weapon, but if I overlap, for example, this Mac 10 and press E, it will be added to my hand socket. And after that, if I pick up any other weapon in, for example, 200 weapon, they will go to my sockets. Alright, I think it's enough for this episode, but in upcoming episodes I'm going to add more improvements to this functionality. Thanks for watching, and if these tutorials are useful for you, please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.